Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of our Talent Navigator series. My name is Tracy Mansour, and I work in global marketing for Randstad, and we're very pleased to have you here today. The focus of our presentation today will be accelerating digital transformation, thriving in the COVID-19 era. It's hard to believe, but in many parts of the world, we're closing in on the one-year anniversary of the outbreak of COVID-19, and obviously the impact has been far-reaching. This is especially true of the impact on the global workforce. To gauge how employers are handling the pandemic, Randstad Sourceright surveyed human capital leaders at large enterprise companies across the globe to understand how well they think they've managed this process, the crisis, their talent challenges, and the impact that COVID-19 has had on their hiring efforts, how they plan to move ahead in the recovery, and what are their growth plans for going ahead. So we're very pleased to bring to you today the results of the surveys, the impact that we believe this will have on your workforce going forward, with a couple of noted global subject matter experts on the topic, whom I'm happy to introduce to you now. So firstly, on the left side of your screen, I'd like to introduce Michael Smith, or Mike as we call him, and he is presently the Managing Director of Randstad Sourceright in the EMEA region and Randstad in the UK. Effective January 1 of next year, though, we are very pleased to announce that Mike will become the Global CEO of Randstad Sourceright. He'll be relocating from his home in Amsterdam to Houston, Texas. So very excited to have you here stateside, Mike. Mike has many years' experience in the talent acquisition industry, working in operational leadership roles across Europe and APAC. He currently manages both lines of business in Europe and UK, as I mentioned before, and he will share many client-specific insights with us today. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Tracy. Pleasure to be here.
And Cindy Keaveney is our Chief People Officer and oversees the HR efforts for our global businesses within Randstad. She is certainly a leading business and human capital expert with over 30 years of experience transforming organizations by leading high-performing teams to produce profitable growth, industry-leading products, and creating corporate strategies in what is obviously a very complex and changing environment. So Cindy, leading our global HR team, is always ensuring that the best strategies are in place to deliver a standout talent experience for all of our people throughout our global businesses within Randstad, and certainly is focused on driving best practices and new approaches when it comes to TA, management engagement and development, and further enabling cross-cultural collaboration and talent mobilization, which certainly could not be more important in today's climate. So welcome, Cindy.
Tracy, it's a pleasure to be here.
So just very quickly, we'll set the stage with the survey and what you and your peers told us. And then what I'll have Cindy and Mike do is have a conversation about the trends as they've seen them, and most importantly, how you can take some of this best practice insights into your respective businesses. So I mentioned this Sourceright Talent Trends Research, as we called it, surveyed employers in 17 markets across the world in Q3 and early Q4 of this year. While it found that most human capital leaders believe that they were able to effectively mobilize at the onset of COVID and have done a very good job in virtualizing their workforce while ensuring safety, of course, many organizations still worry they lack the skills to fully transform to a digital-centric organization. So with that kind of teeing things up, I'm going to defer to Cindy and Mike to take you through some of the top trends, what we found through this extensive research. And again, we welcome your questions through the Q&A or chat function of the WebEx. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Tracy, and a special thanks to everybody who's participating. Mike and I are really happy to be presenting this research and offering our perspectives and insights and experiences, not only within Randstad, but also with clients. So thanks again for joining us. This slide here highlights 5 areas that we will cover. But just a little bit of context, I don't want to state the obvious, but the last 9 months have been trying and tough. There's no question about it. We're dealing with remote workforces. We're dealing with fear. We're dealing with workforce reductions. We're dealing with a lot that has put stress and pressure onto organizations. However, there is light, and there are some good things that have come out of the past 9 months. So we use a term here, and we kind of picked it from McKinsey. They published an article many, many months ago, and they used the term bounded optimism. So what does that mean? It means being realistic and being transparent, but also looking for the things that are working and having some hope for the future. So I think this research is going to do some of both, right? We're going to talk about some of the things that are working really well and some of the things that we're struggling with, and give you some perspective on how leaders across human capital and business have responded. So the first area or trend is a rating. How respondents came to us and said across 4 areas, right? So the first one is across, how organizations are communicating, how they are providing flexible workforces, how they're communicating, how they're dealing with change, and the last one is how overall they're managing their workforce. So if you look at these stats, it's interesting to see, I think, that across those 4 areas, there's a pretty consistent in the 75% range, give or take, where leaders felt that they were managing those 4 areas either very well or extremely well. So I think that says a lot for, even in difficult times, there's agility and there's recognition that we need to do things differently, and we need to introduce new workflows and new technologies and things that can help us thrive. And by and large, I think there's some pretty good research response here that says organizations feel like they're doing a pretty good job. To the right, 27% feel as though they're doing an overall extremely well job managing their workforce. But if you look above that, 27%, there's a pretty big chunk that says they're doing very well. So Mike, I'd love to hear from you. This first question, how are companies adapting their talent strategies during the pandemic? What are some of the things they're doing that are helping to drive that organizational performance?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, despite your comments, Cindy, about them being in a situation that is incredibly difficult for them over the last 9 months, in most of my conversations with global, regional talent acquisition HR leaders, they often reference a time of surprisingly positive change acceptance within their organization at that time. And most of them are using it as an opportunity to push a little bit harder on evolving the service that they offer the business, improving the efficiency, quality, candidate experience, the predictability of being able to hire better candidates, or even using it as a time to kind of get deeper and wider on strategic workforce planning. I think in terms of their response to actually driving organisational performance, you obviously saw a lot of organisations were forced to furlough or stand down employees during that period. And interestingly, a lot of the questions that we asked our customers were, if you could only bring back one job or one type of role, what role would you bring back from furlough and why? And interestingly, a lot of organisations struggled with that, which lent to the idea that there wasn't this idea of the criticality of roles within an organisation. What roles add a disproportionate amount of value, add a significant amount of support to the overall achievement of the business strategy, etc. So we saw some of our clients go out and undertake that exercise during this period of where they weren't doing as much hiring, work out what roles were going to support the organisation overall in achieving their strategy, add a disproportionate amount of value, and then say, how can we bring these roles in an incredibly different way in the future? How can it be more efficient, more consumer-centric? How do we get the predictability around these roles to be better? So I think despite all those challenges that we've seen in the last 9 months, there are organisations out there using this change acceptance to rework the way their organisations have thought about hiring talent previously, and are still having a really deep impact on achieving and augmenting the business strategy.
Yeah, that's really, really good points, Mike. And I also think one of the things that we're experiencing within Randstad, and I'd love to hear your perspective on other clients, but a big commitment for upskilling and reskilling. So as we have time and as we have some space with what's been going on, we're investing, kind of doubling down with our commitment to upskilling in a couple of key areas for our organization. And we're offering some reskilling to our broader clients at large, Mike. So I think those are also two areas that, not that it's new or different, but we're kind of doubling down in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see a mixed bag on that, if I'm honest, across clients. I probably put there's a lot of clients that are wanting to do something, recognizing they're not in that place. There's a lot of clients that are talking about doing something, not doing something. Then there's a lot of clients that are really putting their money where their mouth is on it.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I see those organizations who are doing that are the larger Fortune 500 companies who have potentially deeper pockets to do that at this time. So I still think there's a challenge for organizations in the mid and lower tiers that I just mentioned to find a way to create space to invest in that. Even run little pilots that show great ROI. But I think it's the hiring manager community to convince them that skills relevancy isn't critical right now. I think it's an incredibly difficult task for HR and TA. Nonetheless, we can't give up that fight.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good balanced perspective. So it kind of leads us to our next slide. So this is kind of the good news, right? 70% are optimistic about the future of their business. So we talked a little bit about that. But here are some of the areas of concern or struggle, right? Psychological, financial, well-being. There's been some hit. There's been some impact for sure. The pandemic has taken its toll. And I don't know about all of you on the phone, but I know for sure that there are days that I'm kind of swimming in that big yellow circle in the middle, right? Suffering from online meeting fatigue. I think that's one of the things. The good news is we have the technology to keep our business going and to engage and to interact and have meetings and to, engage in sales and so forth. But it does make for some pretty long days. Also that, interconnectivity, like people getting together either in the work environment or traveling, right, and meeting up for sales meetings or for global meetings or whatever it is. There's a big gap there, and people are feeling that. People are feeling it. They want that interaction. And then clearly the impact of furloughs and some salary cuts and benefit cuts and reductions of workforce. These are kind of, we talked about that bounded optimism. This is the reality of what the last 9 months has impacted and hit us. So, Mike, I called out the yellow circle. Talk a little bit about your experience as a business leader.
Yeah, I think the yellow circle is very prevalent. I think for all levels of the organisation. I think in particular, what I've seen is organisations go to their talent acquisition, their HR departments and say, how can you still, during this time, help us get a better understanding of how we future-proof our organisation for the future? I think that's such an incredibly difficult ask in this current volatile and incredibly uncertain environment. The organisations from a TA and HR perspective, and I think have handled this well, have predominantly created these cross-functional teams of workforce of the future teams or talent acquisition response teams who have done quite a bit of scenario planning. So they said it's impossible for us to see what's going to happen in the next 6, 12, 24 months, etc. What we can do is say, if this was to happen, what would our response be? If we were in a situation where we were in an economically subdued environment for the next 2 years, how would we handle that from a TA/HR perspective? If we were in a situation where a local supply of graduate talent dissipates, how would we respond to that? And interestingly, I've been lucky enough to join a number of those scenario planning workshops for clients. And what often comes from that is, despite the scenario planning never having to put into effect, some of the things that they talk about that they would have done, they end up implementing in a pilot style format anyway, that impacts the here and now. So look, the suffering from online meeting fatigue, the furloughed employees, etc. The best way to try and handle that in the future is to have an agile strategy to handle that. You need to plan for that if that's the case.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mike. And I think if there's one word that kind of flows through successful clients, what they've done, how they've responded, it's agility, right? Leaders need to be agile, which drives that agility across the organization. So clearly, we'll probably be using that word more than once during the course of the next 45 minutes or so. But Yeah, thanks for sharing that perspective. The next slide also has some interesting information, right? So this shows kind of the progression of remote working, pre-COVID, current, and then what organizations are predicting will happen toward the end or after the end of the year. There's a little bit of variation by region, as you can see with the color coding. But prior to COVID, right, 20-some-odd% of organizations provided remote work or supported remote work. To our current situation, where up to 60% of the workforces are working remotely. Many organizations, many of our clients can. Some organizations can't, unfortunately, but many can. And what's interesting is asking people what their plans are post-COVID. Many organizations have experienced some very positive results. Many organizations actually have seen an increase in productivity. Some say, there's been a drop. 46 of the respondents, they've actually increased productivity by working remotely. And there are some obvious reasons for that, right? Number one, people don't have to commute. Number two, there's more flexibility in a day. Number three, there's a lot of pressure on working and caregiving and schooling and all of the things that remote work can provide some flexibility around. And just the engagement and so forth, that people are really liking that flexibility. So in many instances, productivity is up. 15% of our respondents said the productivity is down. So it's not 100% across the board, but it's enough to show that organizations are very willing, once we get out of the pandemic, whenever that is, to continue and to look at their real estate footprint and to look at hybrid models, right? Come in a day a week, but work remotely. So I think there's going to be a lot of flexibility on an ongoing basis based on the fact that organizations prove that this can and does work. Mike, what are you seeing from clients?
Yeah, I mean, I've been incredibly taken back by how organizations have moved to take that step to embracing that work from anywhere mentality. And you touched on the word agility, and I think that's certainly the buzzword at the moment, Cindy. You see organizations I'm asking the question, how do I redefine work? And when I think about redefining work, I think about taking a normal job, breaking it down, reconstructing it. What could be done from home? What has to be done on site? What could be done by RPA? What could be done by statement of work, gig workers, etc. And transparently, out of the 700 clients that we have in our outsourced portfolio globally, I don't see many of them at that stage yet where they're breaking down and redefining work in that way. What they are doing is saying, in the future, I'm not 100% sure how work might get done in the organization. What I do need to do is make sure that I have as many vehicles as possible to get that work done based on the skills that I need to support to bring into the organization to support our overall strategy. So I see during this time lots of organizations making very bold decisions about do we have a compliant model globally that's scalable, that's seamless for acquiring contingent talent? Do I have something in place that allows that, maybe it's an MSP, a contingent talent model, to utilize gig workers in an offshore labor arbitrage way, access to talent that's compliant? Do I have a permanent scalable offshoring facility to help me if in any circumstance I need to hire a significant amount of staff? Do I have robotic process automation coming into my organization? So lots of organizations making that bold choice to move towards, I don't know what the percentage of each piece of the workforce is going to look like, but I want to have the vehicles to be able to do it in a seamless way for my organization in the future, and I want to prepare for that.
Yeah, good point. I think in terms of employer brand during the pandemic, and some of the things that have come out from the research is the ways in which, the frequency with which organizations are communicating and transparent communications. Like I think our organization came out, and yes, there will be some impact. However, our number one priority after the safety and well-being of our employees, which we confirmed and restate all of the time, is to protect as many jobs as we can. And so I think we established that framework. We were transparent around it. And I think that established some credibility, right? So you think about the ways in which even tough messages are communicated and delivered have an absolute impact on employer brand. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the next couple of slides. But any thoughts you have on employer brand, Mike?
Yeah, I think everything you touched on, Cindy, is exactly what I've seen. Good leaders and good talent acquisition HR leaders, along with their marketing departments, do. They've increased the frequency of communication, the transparency of the communication. They've been clear about this is what's happening to us as a company, and this has been our response. They've put in place the right measures to get an understanding of how employees are reacting to their actions, whether it be at a segment level, a geography level, etc. So I think organisations who were good at that previously already had a leg up in moving towards COVID to differentiate themselves and improve the strength of their employer brand. I think I've also seen from kind of an outside-in perspective, organisations really focus on making sure that in terms of attracting, retaining and engaging talent, they've really focused on making sure they're also improving the inclusivity of their brand's proposition within the market currently, needless to say. And then secondly, trying to mirror a little bit more the feeling of this is who we are as a company, this is how we treat our employees throughout that employee life cycle. So if you take a very simple case of maybe applying for a job, what's it like to apply for a job? And we had a banking customer more recently who said it's easier to open a bank account with us than it is to apply for a job. It takes 27 minutes. You've got to fill in 34 forms, et cetera, et cetera. So they said that's the experience of applying for a job and working as an employee doesn't mirror the consumer product experience that we want. But we want to take some steps towards that so that we're in a situation where our employees are happier, that we're bringing in more of the talent. And needless to say, if you're having a very negative experience in applying for a job, then obviously that's going to impact on your desire to want to work or procure services, products from that company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which kind of leads us into the next slide, Mike, and it gives some color to even so, though some things have to happen in organizations around furloughs and workforce reductions. The way in which it's done can actually drive either preserve or increase employer brand. So here are a couple of stats, right? What kind of outplacement and coaching and mentoring is offered along the way, right? Ability to network within the organization or introduction to other organizations, and alumni talent pools, right? So setting up that opportunity for people who are going to have to be looking for other jobs, how are they being networked across alumni talent pools so they have some introductions and some access. So I think that, for us at Randstad, I think we have taken all of these to heart, and we're one of the organizations that has minimally preserved our employer brand. We get a lot of feedback in our engagement surveys, which we started in the height of the pandemic doing weekly, so we could take that pulse and get that feedback and make decisions that matter to people. We got a lot of, even though it's a tough time and we have to make some tough decisions, you're being transparent about it and you're treating our colleagues well. And that's a really important thing. It sounds so obvious, but if done well, it can help. 51% say that their brand hasn't changed who responded to our survey, and 42 report an actual improvement, even though it's been 9 months of difficult decisions for organizations. So any perspective on this, Mike?
Yeah, I've had quite a close working experience with 2 or 3 clients here in Europe that have had an alumni talent pool set up for 3 or 4 years. And we help with the content engagement, nurturing of keeping that alumni talent pool alive, coming back when being considered for permanent part-time assignments, etc. And those organisations had to make some tough choices around reducing their workforce during the last 9 months. I was blown away by the willingness from that alumni talent pool to actually take a chance on those individuals based on the great experience that they had when they were either made the decision to leave or be off-boarded by that organisation.
Yep.
It was incredible, the success rates, which I can't quote, but were very, very high in terms of helping those individuals get back. So despite it being only 17% here, even though we had a few below, that would be one that I'd really encourage individuals to invest in into the future.
Yeah. Really, really, really good points. Really good points. So we're moving into communications, which is the next trend kind of that came out of our survey. I mentioned earlier that for Randstad, and I think for many organizations I've read, and I've read a lot of articles and talked to clients, but the number one area of importance for organizations is the safety and well-being of organizations. So that is critically important, and we hear that, we say it, we read about it, so that's there. We talked about reskilling. We talked about stepping up the recruitment processes, right? So how are we bringing people into the organization in new and different ways? So these are, I don't want to read them all. You can read them here as Mike and I kind of banter back and forth. But communication, absolutely key for talent leaders. How do you do it in a remote environment? What are some of the technologies and tools that you're using? And how are talent leaders managing priorities as their roles shift?
Sorry, Cindy, I just lost you there. Can you ask that question again?
Yeah, I'm just talking a little bit about some of the important areas of communication that organizations are instilling across. And if you think about talent leaders managing priorities as roles shift, and they're trying to drive that agility and bounce from change to change, and do some things strategically, but also do some things on the fly because there are no big playbooks here. So
yeah, absolutely. I think you talked about bounded optimism earlier, and I think talent leaders have an incredible challenge, yet an incredible opportunity at the moment. And across our client base, I see talent leaders really trying to operate in both a complex tactical, yet a strategic duopoly at the moment. So on that tactical front, they're focused on day-to-day execution in the here and now. I need to manage well-being. I need to manage communication proactively. I need to make sure that communication is landing in the business in the right way from an engagement perspective. There's critical hires that we still need to make. But I also see quite a few of them saying, what are the seeds that I can plant at the moment that have the potential to fundamentally change the way that we engage, attract, and retain talent in the future, particularly when, who can say when that is, the inevitable economic upswing kind of comes back. I think there's some concrete examples of some of those seeds that I see our clients kind of placing at the moment. You mentioned earlier reskilling. So we see a number of our clients running reskilling pilots with personal learning cloud curators for particular segments of their organization. We see organizations running what we call proactive internal mobility pilots. So that's where they'll take a section of the internal talent acquisition team and say, culturally, these two lines of businesses are open to be taking individuals from other parts of the organization. Our HRIS system isn't up to date, so we're not going to be able to utilize that to go and find that talent that exists within our company. A lot of them, honestly speaking, might use LinkedIn as their own internal talent mobility sourcing mechanism, and that they've set a general acceptance rule within the organization to say it's okay to go and procure talent or approach talent from those organizations who from a line of business or an industry perspective are in decline. As well as generally introducing a significant amount of new HR technologies during this time of increased change acceptance. So that idea of kind of keeping, if I can, 75% of your eye on the here and now, tactical day-to-day delivery, and 25% on there's still an opportunity for me to plant some seeds here on how I can influence how things get done in the future. Let's not lose that time of increased change acceptance, particularly from a digital perspective.
So, Mike, I'm going to ask you this question and then I'll answer it, but I'd love your perspective. How do you see the role of HR changing in the months to come? We've talked about this.
Look, I don't know if my answer is going to be the popular one here, but from my perspective, great HR leaders' roles, I don't think haven't changed significantly as a result of COVID. In my experience, great HR leaders were always really focused on engagement. They were really focused on the well-being of their staff and the mindset, that really difficult balance of co-ensuring and driving the people and the financial, commercial strategy at the same time. Now, whilst there's obviously been quite a big increase in the time spent on engagement, well-being, inclusion, etc., generally speaking, within our client base, I think what's happened is those great HR leaders are just giving a greater chance to shine during this period. The only exception to that, I think, is a little bit where you've got those industries that have been incredibly heavily hit by the downturn in COVID, who've obviously spent a significant amount of their time looking at the outplacement, the alumni talent pools to protect their employer brand and their employees in the future. But look, it's difficult to say given the uncertain and complex world we're living in at the moment, but I think if you were working on the right things previously, the exacerbation of COVID should put you in a position where there, as a HR leader, you can use that as a competitive advantage moving forward.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't think that's unpopular. I think I would like to say I agree, and I do. I think it's an issue of gradation, to your point, right? So the amount of time spent, the frequency with which engagement surveys have been done during the past 9 months, right? The focus on building out workforce flexibility and scheduling, right? So we've done that within the Randstad organization. We've brought it up a notch, and we've made some decisions on things like in the U.S. as an example, if you need to reduce your work hours because you have caregiving needs, schooling needs, whatever that choice is for you. If you go down to 20 hours a week, we will still maintain your full benefits, where in the past it was 30 hours a week. So I think gradation, right? We're doing things, but with more intensity, more frequency, and offering expanded opportunities in some of these areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For sure. So it would be a bad thing if we weren't aligned on that, Mike.
No, I agree.
So the next slide gets into a little bit of the technology component, right? So I will say that without technology, without Randstad being in the cloud, without our access to all of what we have with HR analytics and engagement and Google Hangout and the technology that we have at our fingertips, we would not have been able to thrive in the past 9 months. That being said, there's some interesting increasing in adoption and scaling of technologies as a result of the pandemic. There's some interesting nuances by region here. Probably not great surprises, right? APAC, right? It's more adoption and introduction of scale technologies than some other regions. But the stat here, Mike, and I know that you talk about it, is 3.9 on average, 3.9 new technologies adopted by businesses during the pandemic. That's interesting, right? And I'd love to hear your perspective on that stat and which technologies, from your perspective, have added the greatest value to the business. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that statistic is staggering, if I'm honest. And when we dig in a little bit underneath that, from a statistical point of view, in my conversations with clients, I mean, my initial impression was that's probably just more adaptation of kind of work tech. So the Zoom, the Microsoft team meetings, Google, etc. But in my conversations, what I've seen is that it's been a lot more than that. It's been the implementation of engagement technologies, a further investment in talent analytics and HRS systems, a focus on differentiation within the recruitment technology piece, whether it be marketing tech, etc. So I think that statistic surprised me. I think particularly given that there's on average 400 new HR technologies that come out every year. to have four during the pandemic, whether it be by necessity or by choice, just shows how far organisations have come in terms of their ability to digitally onboard new technologies. I think the ones that I've personally seen have the most powerful impact on organisations are the ones that have the ability to combine HR, talent analytics, and engagement. When you bring those two elements together, it has an incredibly meaningful impact. So the ability to be able to say, I can see a particular segment of employees in a particular region, and I can see the trend there on a particular topic is going the wrong way, and overlaying predictive analytics on it to say that if we don't do something to change this soon, the likelihood is going to be we're going to have X amount of turnover within the next 7 to 8 weeks. I know as a business leader, I found that incredibly insightful in being able to do skip meetings with certain members of my organisation. I heard from many clients that they were doing the same. And that ability to be able to listen in on little bits of the organisation that need tweaking has been incredible in terms of maintaining our engagement, motivation, resilience, agility, etc. And then I think the second one would just be those organisations who pre-invested in online learning management systems during this time and had the capability to quickly onboard and roll out content around mindset, resilience, well-being, working from home, etc., training in a new way of working, onboarding new workers. We see a huge correlation between high engagement scores and the ability to be able to have those LMSs rolled out and new employees being onboarded. So that would be the ones that stand out for me.
I think you raised a really, really important point. How do you integrate some of the HR technologies to bring it to the next level and to do some of that, not only prescription, but prediction as well? I would have to say if I had to pick one technology as an HR leader that has added probably the most value to what we've done over the last 9 months, it's been our Peakon technology, which is our engagement technology. As I mentioned, weekly, then biweekly. Now we're doing monthly, but we do trending and we make leadership team decisions based on the trends that come out of that data. So really, really important thing to do. And then to combine it with the other areas, as you talked about, Mike, really important. The next question, I think, is really important. I know we've wrestled with this some, transparency within our organization. It's not easy to adopt technologies. And when we're talking about agility and making quick decisions and the need to adopt in a quick way, ideas, thoughts, suggestions for organizations on how to do this in a meaningful and well way.
I think first and foremost, the thought process of introducing a new technology, in my opinion, should never be viewed just as an IT project. It has to be viewed as one of business and cultural change that involves cross-functional teams. And I think where possible, depending on the size of the change, are dedicated individuals in business transformation or project management roles. We have a saying within Randstad that tech is easy and change is hard. As well as you need to fall in love with the problem rather than just fall in love with the technology solution. I think it's been a long, hard road for us as a company to understand the level of investment and the dedicated effort FTE required to really get digital change right within our company. And it wasn't until we kind of said, look, this is really our ambition. We need to get better at change. It can't just be about running it like an IT project and lifting up the hood and saying, if that's our ambition, how much money, how many dedicated FTE do we actually spend as a total percentage of our OPEX currently or PE currently on change digital initiatives been running really well? And that was a stark realization for us as a company that we weren't necessarily putting where our money, where our mouth is. We've now done that, and we see it still not being perfect, but it's miles away from where it was previously.
Yeah, no, really important point. It is change. Anytime you introduce a new technology, it's change. So you need to bring the people along who are going to be affected by the change. And you also have to look at changing the ways in which we work, right? What are the work processes that are going to change? As you overlay a technology onto something that somebody is already doing, and you're not going to get the desired outcome or effect. So we've learned some of that the hard way as well, right?
Totally. Yeah, the business transformation roles, they go in and scope that change. They work with L&D to engage the people to talk about how that's going to change. You need people from operations to be part of that team that's embedding the change. It's a complex process.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But when done well, it can drive what we're looking to get for our return on investment for sure. On the next slide, there's a list here of the top 10 technologies that our respondents to the survey said that they invested in during the pandemic. So we talked about 3.9 new technologies on average by business. You can see by far the number one is video and online interviewing. So Mike mentioned that a few times. What are we doing to change the process of the ways in which we're recruiting? Interestingly enough, organizations also reported that video and online interviewing is the number one technology that they plan to continue to keep and do post-pandemic. So good experiences, it's working well, it's driving efficiency, it's improving candidate experience in many ways, right? So some very good success with that, and it's number one on this list and the number one on the keep list for post-pandemic usage. Any comments, Mike, on this list? Any thoughts on kind of the top three? You've referenced some of them as we've been going along, but
yeah, I think I'm not surprised to see those top three there. I think if I look at most of the organisations we deal with from an outsource perspective, they would have the majority of the top five, I think, in place at the moment. I think I'm still taken back a little bit by organisations' continued optimism about continuing to utilise video and online interviewing tools. I had a meeting this morning with the global head of talent acquisition of a very large financial services organisation, and she said, we will not move away from video interviewing and replace it with face-to-face interviews at any point in the next 12 months globally. It will be the only time that there will be the opportunity to do that will be when that person's starting with us. And I applaud the boldness of that decision. I think it's, given the difficult circumstances, I think it's potentially a step in the right direction. I think the challenge for organisations in that environment is we've been lucky enough to do some studies with some clients who are showing that through their engagement scores and through our own engagement scores, the level of loyalty to an organisation of those individuals who are onboarded in a virtual way and haven't had a large amount of their time or a large percentage of their working time in the organisation physically engaged with an environment, colleagues, etc. You see a lower level of loyalty and a higher willingness to accept other offers from organisations in that space. So I think the challenge for organisations is that's okay in the initial periods. How do you still tackle that engagement, that connection with colleagues that typically happens around the water cooler, etc. So I think that's certainly a gap they still need to close. From our perspective, from a technology point of view, and for some of our clients, we're continuing to move towards that one single view of talent. So how do you bring all of the talent from your VMS, your ATS, your CRM, and your alumni talent pools, HRS system, all into one central repository? We have some proprietary tools that do it. Some of our competitors do. There's some great products in market like an Adapto, a LiveHire, etc., that permit that single view of talent. But I see that continually being a topic of discussion for customers moving forward. When the business environment is difficult to predict, you don't know whether you're going to hire permanent, contingent, gig workers, etc. That's a big investment and step towards giving you that agility very quickly within your organization.
Yeah. And some of these, there's overlap, right? And we've had feedback as we've done training in our organization that the opportunity during this time to engage with global colleagues in some instances for us does drive engagement, right? So we can't underestimate the impact of providing platforms and providing opportunities for people to engage in different ways, to learn together, right? To solve problems together, to do those things. Is it as ideal as face-to-face? Maybe yes, in some instances, maybe no. But the formation of those opportunities and experiences are driving engagement, and we're seeing that throughout our organization, which is really gratifying to see.
No, totally. I think I'd like to think that within our leadership teams, within leaders within the external world, should be trying to drive that passionate, unfiltered debate during those times to get that pursuit of the best goal. And I think we've been really open and honest with our leaders that that's more difficult to achieve in a virtual environment. So having ways using Google Jamboards, making sure that you're including everyone, asking individuals, are you a 5 on this idea? Are you a 5th on this idea? Around really getting behind it, just altering slightly the way of working to make sure that you're continuing to get that, I think is critical to ensure you're still getting the right direction and answers from your leadership team. And lots of the talent acquisition leaders that I work with are using some of those when you have a global talent acquisition team that you work with virtually.
Yeah, and I think making the commitment in difficult times where we are having to be agile and having to make quick decisions, right? Mike, as a leadership team, you and I are going through some global training right now, right? And so we're trying to set the stage and be better and learn and do some things differently as we go along as well, right?
So learn it all, not a know-it-all mentality.
You have some great one-liners. All right, so let's go to the fifth and final kind of theme and trend that came out of the survey, and it is around talent analytics. And we've touched on this some as we've gone through our discussion, but how are we using it and how are we planning for the future around analytics? How are we taking data, looking at insights, and trying to plan for our future? So, Mike has talked about looking at different kinds of analytics from different systems in an integrated way. I think that's one thing that we're doing at Randstad, and we have an opportunity to do it better, but I think we're starting to do that and doing more prediction, which I think is helpful. How has the role of talent analytics, Mike, changed in 2020? And what are companies, how are they using insights in some new and different ways?
Yeah, in short, I think those organisations that made the investment in talent analytics pre-COVID, it should have been a game-changing platform for them. I think COVID has really put a spotlight on organisations' talent analytics maturity. We have a global retail organisation that we work with that I had a conversation with last week where he was feeling frustrated that business leaders were coming to him and asking him questions that he felt HR or TA should have been able to answer. But by them previously not making that investment in the talent analytics space, they simply didn't have the data to be able to answer some of what they considered to be incredibly pertinent questions at this point in time. How many contingent workers do we have? How long have they worked for us? Where are they located at the moment? Whether that be from the VIMS, the technology, just one kind of simple example. Furthermore, what I've seen is organisations starting to bring together now those multiple complex systems of data into one single view. So they're taking talent analytics data and combining it with commercial finance data and creating quite complex target operating models and overlaying predictive analytics over the top of that. So trying to be able to answer questions like, what source of hire gets promoted the quickest within our organisation? When we lose talent, who do we lose it to? And what is the performance of those individuals on average before we lose them? And what is the overall sentiment of the exit interview from those? So incredibly powerful insights that really allow you to kind of surgeon-like make tweaks to your workforce. And the ability to look at ROI calculations from that, to make more important decisions around productivity, genuinely improve the overall gene pool of your organisation is, incredible.
Yeah, that's great. And if you think about, if you had to pick the most innovative use, either from a business leader perspective or in talking to clients, what's the most innovative use of talent analytics you've seen this year?
Yeah, I think that I could talk about this topic forever, so I'll try and keep it to maybe a couple of concrete examples. But I see a number of examples where organisations are continually trying to optimise the process between time to hire and quality of hire, and quality of hire being measured typically by hiring manager satisfaction, willingness to promote, hard KPI achievement within a certain kind of time frame. And then a number of organisations who have those mature talent insights models are continually A/B testing that process, the technology elements, the people elements of it, to try and kind of crack the code of getting the best balance between the two. But we have quite an evolutionary relationship with a client in the UK, for example, who has spent a significant amount of time doing that only for data scientists, and they've been doing it now for almost 18 months. And they now believe that they've cracked the code on having the optimum balance between recruiting and converting data scientists through the funnel, keeping them in the organisation afterwards and understanding what's important to them, as well as making sure the quality of hire is incredibly high as well. Now, it remains to be seen whether they've got that right or not, but I think it's an incredible advantage for them if they have been able to get that right from a competition point of view against their competitors. I think that's one standout. I think secondly, you're starting to see a lot of organisations starting to want to get an understanding of what will technology attribution and our ambitions around technology attribution have on our company, i.e. what roles are going to be impacted by robotic process automation and what should we do with them in the future. So I've seen platforms like a Fathom and a BrightFit, for example, as part of Randstad Rise Smarts offering, give you the ability to kind of get a general understanding about what the potential impact is of those RPA technologies on your organisation, what roles will be impacted by that, and then what are the roles that exist within your organisation that those individuals could make a move to that are less likely to be impacted by RPA and artificial intelligence in the future. And then saying, as a result of that, how, if I'm hiring roles for those roles that are impacted in the future, what skills can I hire now that allow that individual to make a more seamless jump to that less impacted role in the future, lowering the burden on L&D, creating a more liquid workforce, meaning that there's a significant seamlessness to pushing internal mobility. So I did maybe just a couple of concrete examples of clients who are kind of at the forefront of the talent acquisition industry doing some really innovative stuff at the moment with technology and talent analytics combined.
Yeah, that's a great example, Mike, of using some of that intelligence and that data to figure out, right, how we're going to plan for the workforce of the future. So I have one more thought, Mike. Great article that was in the latest edition, the November edition of the Harvard Business Review, the work from anywhere future. So what does that do, right? You think about work from home, work from anywhere, like the culture of digital nomads, right, who want to live anywhere. But what does that do to a global talent pool? And what does that do for us and for organizations for whom we're recruiting to open up access to talent, right? So it's really kind of an interesting plus to all of this when we think about that work from anywhere opportunity for many, many organizations.
Absolutely. I'll answer it in two ways if that's okay. I think I had a conversation yesterday with a large client who come to us and said, we've got a pretty good geographical footprint. So our ability to be able to recruit talent in countries isn't too bad. What we don't know is there hot spots of talent that are critical for us to be able to get access to where we don't have a physical location and don't plan on having a physical location in the future? How can you as an organization help us find those golden veins of talent that exist globally? And then how can you start talent pooling those particular skill sets and bring them into our organization in a super seamless way? And I think that it's a challenge for us and for other organizations to identify those golden veins of talent outside of the places where they have physical locations at the moment, because my assumption is they should already have pretty good insights on those locations. And the challenge for us as an organization is the seamless element of that. So I dream of a future where our talent advisors are sitting in front of clients and saying, here's a short list of individuals. The short list of individuals is made up of people from gig work platforms globally. They're made of domestic individuals who are looking for contingent or permanent work. We've got some statement of work organisations that have undertaken great work for you previously. Or there's an element of this work that we can reconstruct and break down and do via RPA in the future, and then we can job share it between two other individuals. So, and if we're going to deliver that, no matter what vehicle we choose to get that work done, it should still feel seamless for the hiring manager, without any liability, taxation, complexities, etc. That's the dream that I think we need to be able to give our clients in the future. It's seamless access to global talent in the blink of an eye.
I think you just beautifully described total talent utopia.
Yeah.
All right, Tracy, we'll turn it back to you. I don't know if any questions have come in, but I know we're closing in on the hour, so it's back to you.
Yes, so we have had a couple of questions come in, and one, maybe, Cindy, we'll go back to your comment about the engagement tool you've used. You specifically referenced Peakon, that's been invaluable to you and your colleagues during this pandemic. Is there any technology or process that, if you knew the COVID-19 situation would have endured as long as it is and perhaps will, that you would have implemented more quickly or adapted to perhaps earlier in the process? Is there anything you would have done or a lesson learned that would be helpful to share?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think back to the comment that the bantering that Mike and I did about, is it a new technology for us because of COVID? No, but the frequency with which we used it, I think we jumped on that pretty quickly. So I think from a Peakon technology standpoint, I don't think we would have done anything differently. Maybe shifted the frequency from weekly to biweekly a little bit more quickly, because I think we tired. One of the interesting learnings, and we don't have a lock on it, but a workforce is a spectrum of people, and we introduced a lot of questions around well-being. And we have a segment of our population, they want it, they want more of it, they want to hear about it, they want the support for it. And we have a section of our population, please don't ever ask me about well-being. I have my people I talk to. I don't want to bring it into the workforce. So I think maybe spending a little bit more time on, should we have had fewer? Well, we'll learn from that. But I think that's something that we need to think about, the whole concept of well-being. And what are the stops and starts of responsibility for an organization in that realm? So I think we need to do some additional thinking there.
Yeah, I think that could be certainly a conversation onto itself, but thank you for your comments. Yeah. And then, Mike, we've had some questions come in around the talent analytics examples you gave. And for an organization that perhaps hasn't delved into that, quite deep enough yet, or that they're early in the learning curve, where would someone start to evaluate talent analytics and how they can bring that further to light within their organization to drive hiring decisions or talent modeling? Any comments on that?
Sure. First and foremost, I would be hung up on not having a complex or technology or a huge investment budget. My advice is start somewhere. We have organizations that are still using Google Sheets. They've downloaded Google Forms from online. I personally subscribe to a lot of blogs. There's an individual called John Sullivan in the US who I think publishes a huge amount of free content that you can download and repurpose. So I would absolutely suggest going online. There's Reddit communities that have huge amounts of templates that people share. Take them, roll them out within your organization, and just get those learnings. And my advice is to start very simple. Just say, if I had a magic wand that could solve, if I could only measure 3 talent analytics KPIs that are going to have the biggest impact on my organization in the next 6 months, what are those 3 talent analytics? And start with that in a simple way, and then go from there. That would be my advice.
Well, that's great advice, and we appreciate you and Cindy both, Mike, today joining us. For those of you who are attending the session, you'll get the link to listen back to the recording and look for the full report and research that we've commented on here today. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. We appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.